Turtles all the way down. I'm Jake, sometimes Jenk. This week we have Kim Radmacher, theater director from Toronto, someone I've known for a few years, that we, keep in touch on Facebook, like a lot of the guests that I've been having on the podcast so far. A little bit of an update on the podcast production and what's going on. We've recorded more than, maybe about 15 episodes so far. We've released about, I guess this will be the 8th one that we're going to release. It's probably not going to be the case that we'll release all of them, but I might. I haven't totally decided that. As you know, we don't do much editing, almost no editing at all, unless there's some kind of a, screech or something else like that that arrives on the recording. We tend to just have a open discussion, and so far it's working out well. And we have this week coming up, which will be December 21st. We're going to have the launch party at my place where we record these conversations. Hope to have most of the people that have appeared as guests to be there that night, and a few friends of the podcast, people that helped out, and some close friends and family. So that's going to be fun, and I'm going to probably try something new there as well. I'm gonna likely, somewhere around it's like a 7 to 11 kind of an event. PM, and somewhere around 9 o'clock I'm probably going to take the mic and do one of these little monologues that I do, and it's going to be live for the first time, and this will be kind of an interesting experiment as well. I'm kind of, as I said, doing this backwards. I'm going to do a podcast first and then go on to live monologues at some point, maybe stand-up comedy, who knows. I've got all these interests in the various arts. I've done some film. I've got into music recently, doing some live shows there. Kind of art and writing has always been in the background. I know very little about theater and opera, and we got to talk to Kim about these things as she's directing some plays in and around Toronto. When I was in university in undergrad philosophy at the University of Toronto, I became very much enamored with the philosopher Friedrich Nietzsche, as I think a lot of, for whatever reason, it tends to be a lot of young men get taken in by this philosopher. And also, another philosopher seems to be quite popular with the young men studying philosophy, or at least being somewhat tangentially exposed to it, and that's Ayn Rand. And not a fan of Ayn Rand, but a big fan of Nietzsche. And one of the more interesting and most useful ideas, I guess, that he was propagating was something that he talked about in The Birth of Tragedy, where he talked about the creative forces at play in the world, and he called this the Apollonian and the Dionysian. You see various versions of this discussed, and it's an analogy that's could be used in various different ways. And within the arts, it makes a great deal of sense to me. When you look at various art works and artists, be it film or music or opera or theater or what have you, or visual arts, what you'll find is quite often a kind of an interplay between, form and function, to, level it down to something simple and dual like that. What he described was the Apollonian is kind of this inclination that we have towards structure and order and regulated and, reification. Apollo is the sun god, and as such, he's the most regular, in the sense that, comes up every day, goes down every night. It adds, the seasons and structure to time and to the activities of people throughout history. So Apollo represents order and structure. Dionysus is more the kind of the, ecstatic side of us, more about the body and less about the rational organizing principles that move us towards creating these things. And I've noticed, and I guess Nietzsche did, and a lot of people have, that what we consider to be the great examples of art often tend to be those that have a really nice interplay, or as Nietzsche might call it, a dance between these two forces of creative energy that's in the universe. And it kind of relates to my own personal history as well, and I can use this metaphor and this analogy to describe that as well. And I've talked about this many times in the various episodes that we've had, in that in my personal experience, I guess I tended to be very much more Apollonian for most of my life. And later on, probably more like into my late 30s and early 40s, I started to discover the Dionysian side. And I guess my attraction and my jumping into the world of music is probably the most representative of that attraction. And when I do that, I find that this ecstatic mode that I go into, this creative landscape that you operate in, I find myself going a little nuts, a little mad, and I quickly realize that I'm taking this a little. It's becoming imbalanced. I'm taking it too far down one side or the other, and in my own personal life, the fact that I have this podcast now is kind of a correction for that, in that I'm engaged in a form of creativity, if you'll allow me to call it that, in which it's more of a structured, rational approach to what we're doing here. When you're having a discussion, you're kind of forced to, you're externalizing it in words, and it kind of alienates it a little bit further from whatever, however you think of, if there is such a thing as a more fundamental meaning, or more a deeper meaning of things. We tend to go towards, and this is, I think, why therapy works as well. It's like when you're forced to talk about something, when you're forced to bring it to the realm of ideas and then have to communicate it to somebody, you have to structure it. And when you structure it, you kind of give it a narrative meaning. And sometimes it helps to make sense for the person that's discussing their own life, and I'm seeing this in my own personal experiences, and as I've lived, as I say, close to the age of 50, you get the advantage of a little bit of hindsight, and you're able to see some framing and some patterns that are going on, and some of the patterns that happen in your own life are played out historically as well, and that's always kind of fascinating. But this, and as I said, I see it in the world. Most recently we had this election in the United States, and I guess what you noticed was that a lot of people were making their decisions to vote for whoever they were going to vote for, based mostly on what I consider to be emotional body reactions, things to do with fear and security and anger and hatred and those sort of things, and tribalism and fear of the other. These are the kind of things that are, I think of them as more of the emotional side of the world and our experiences, and less to do with abstract thinking. And much like in my own life, I've seen a need to kind of swing the pendulum a little bit further back into the Apollonian, structured, regulated, abstract way of seeing things that's represented by this podcast, for example. I'm also sensing that maybe the world needs a little bit more of this. It's almost like, much like I did myself, the world has kind of gone a little bit too far into the Dionysian. And back to Nietzsche, this is kind of the thing that he talked or wrote at length about, and I guess somewhat worried about, or gave a warning about, and which was this, I guess, which is expressed in this his notion of the what he called the death of God. He realized that if you dig deep and take apart your beliefs and ideas, and even throughout the history of philosophy, what you find is that that there is lacking a fundamental base on which everything, all the truths can be, justified. And what he saw there and predicted was that as a result of this, the world would probably most naturally fall into a kind of nihilism, but as kind of an intermediary stage. And it seems like it's kind of odd, but he kind of said this about 100 years ago. He had essentially said that his ideas were out of season and that he was probably about a century to ahead of the curve where people will be able to read and understand him. More or less, he's right. I mean, it's turned out that, the world at large and the everyday person, and you're seeing this in, mass media, in culture and movies and song and TV shows, there is kind of an understanding that that beliefs might lack fundamental justifications. And as a result, a lot of people come to the conclusion that, well, then I guess every belief is okay. And, my understanding of the world is just as, right and relevant as yours because, by the way, don't we know that there is no foundation for these beliefs? And this is kind of an age-old problem that, that our culture is coming up against right now, but that I feel like a lot of individuals come to throughout their lives. And I'm not saying that I've totally figured this out, but sometimes I feel like I have, and sometimes it takes me a bit of discussion and conversation to get to that point where I can then, express that. If you ask me right now, I probably wouldn't be able to jump in on the fly and tell you why I'm not too worried about nihilism, but it seems like the world is at that point right now, and how we, as a species, I guess, if you want to go real grand about it, but even as you can call it delineated differently and call us in the West, or even your own, your own culture in your own nation state, like Canada, which seems to have a reputation for being a very much an open and progressive culture. We find that we seem to be skewed towards the emotional. We see that people are easily falling for these propaganda and rhetoric of advertising, which has been applied, as it always has been, to politics and elections. And how elections seem to be won these days has more to do with appealing to those, more of the emotional and less of the abstract thought. Now, politics has gone that way. And as I said, the advertising world had pretty much discovered this a long time ago. And, we continue to deal with the ramifications of this world in which, strangely enough, it seems like some people take an Apollonian approach that is to study with great scrutiny how certain things work and processes and human psychology and social groups, etc. And then through this abstract rational research, they discover the emotional underpinnings of human behavior, and then that is used and exploited to move the beliefs of the populace, and this is proving to be very effective. And it seems like we haven't really figured out how we're going to deal with this break between, looking at the world, with your gut, or looking at it abstractly and stepping out of the cave and trying to understand what's going on and trying to apply it. As is with art, it is with politics. I guess I would have to go along and say that it should not be one or the other. Too much of one-sided way of seeing it, that is too much with the cold-hearted, abstract, regularizing approach of the Apollonian is going to lead you into I don't know, maybe it leads you into the Stalinist nightmares that we saw throughout the last century, whereas the Dionysian approach might lead you to maybe make rash, decisions, responses, reactions to events, which might also lead you astray. Now, so you're led to think that, well, maybe if we're able to marshal both of these forces in some kind of a balanced dance, that we'll be able to create something better. But I'm not so sure, because you look at Nazi Germany. There's an example of some people that actually took on this approach by Nietzsche, and as a result, I guess they created this movement that seemed to be at once, rooted in this Dionysian responses of the body of these emotional hearkening back to glory days past of Hellenistic superiority, of Germanic Aryan superiority, what have you, which are all kind of based on this these gut feelings and an appeal to fear and dominance and what have you. But they're also known to be very structured, organized, and the joke about at least the trains ran on time, and so. It kind of frightens me that it seems like when you're able to marshal these two forces in politics, that it might actually end up being worse, in the sense that in the hands of a group of people with nefarious intent, as was in the case of the Nazis in Germany, they end up doing a pretty good job, and from their perspective, a pretty good job is having a great influence on the world, and their quixotic efforts to enforce their worldview on the rest of the planet. So, I mean, we got a lot of things to learn, whether in our personal lives or in the politics and the culture and in the species at large. We have to deal with these forces and find the right balances for them. And I guess it's a dance that just continues. So we have our discussion today with Kim Radmacher, and we touched on some of these things. She being a theater director, we touched on these things in the arts. Very little talk of AI this time, so maybe there's a reprieve for those of you who think maybe I'm talking too much about that. But hope you enjoyed this. Talk soon. What's that?
I said you have close to the same number of books as I do. So.
Oh, well, yeah, those are distilled down. Every time I moved, I would
same here. I have to do another call, but...
Yeah, it's been a while since I've done a call, but it's also been a while since I've bought books, to be honest. So.
Are you doing online stuff?
No, I'm just not reading as much.
You're not reading?
Well, I mean, I'm reading a lot, but I tend to read, online. Essays, news articles, research reports, that sort of thing, but rarely am I reading a full book. So
I just started again.
Yeah?
Yeah.
Like fiction, nonfiction?
Both.
Yeah.
So I think it's important to start reading books again.
Yeah.
Because I got into that short form thing, and then your attention span becomes really short.
Yeah, definitely. And I mean, so if you ask me, do I read? Yeah, I read probably 8 hours a day, but but I don't really read like you would have said in the past.
Yeah. And I think there's a kind of joy in reading fiction, even crappy fiction.
Yeah.
Yeah.
You're a playwright and a play director, but not a playwright.
Not a playwright, just a director.
Yeah. But, I think of plays and novels and that sort of thing as kind of like creating simulations, in the sense that you're thinking how the world might be in some sense, and then you're bringing it to fruition somehow in your words or in your presented, theatrical performance, or if it's a movie like that. So, but I know very little about that world. I guess maybe it's that lacking some patience to maybe discover some of that world. Mm-hmm. And I thought we could have an interesting conversation, mainly because I don't know anything about that stuff. Yeah.
Creating a play.
Yeah.
So it depends on the people involved. Mm-hmm. So every play I create ends up being a different beast. It ends up having a different trajectory. I'm starting rehearsals today. I still don't know how we're going to do it. I don't have a plan. Don't air this until...
Well, Well, sometimes that's
after we
better,
start.
right? Because you're leaving room for the unconscious, I guess, in a way.
Well, and that's exactly what I was going to say. For me, I'm highly intuitive. It took me a long time, especially we were talking earlier when we were having breakfast about women putting themselves out there and taking on these types of roles, leadership roles. When I was younger, I felt a lot of pressure to be able to articulate in an intellectual way why I wanted to do every single solitary thing I'm going to do.
Oh, wow. So to justify it?
Justify it.
Yeah.
Most of the people, this is not necessarily a gender thing. In theater school, you're surrounded mostly by women.
Oh, really? Okay.
That tends to be who specializes in drama at university. So I was surrounded by women who were very smart and articulate. I didn't feel like I was like that. And I felt a lot of pressure to project manage, know what I was visualizing, and to be able to justify it intellectually. Now I've been doing it for 20 years.
Yeah.
I'm much more comfortable being intuitive and trusting myself. So sometimes when I get into a creative argument with somebody and they're like, but why? It's like being a parent. It's like, because I said so.
Because it feels right.
Because it feels right. And then sometimes when I'm looking at the final product, it makes a lot of intellectual sense. So there's stuff going on.
Yeah, I totally get that. I mean, I can apply that to my musical creation in that, it's kind of the unconscious part of me, the body part of me that makes the music. Yeah. The intellectual just kind of comes in once in a while.
Yeah.
Yeah. And you got to leave room for that. And I guess great art is always kind of an interplay between the two. So I'm a fan of, Nietzsche. So he always this Dionysian and Apollonian.
Yeah, exactly.
Kind of thing.
Exactly. It's that sort of friction between the two. And for me, art, if we're getting sort of into an esoteric talk
of course.
About art.
Let's do it.
For me, it often, I can't explain. That's why abstract art works for me. I love dance. Dance is my number one favorite form of art. I don't do a lot of it, but I do include movement in our rehearsal process.
Oh, so you're very conscious of that when you're designing that experience.
Yeah. So a lot of the stuff we do, some actors like it, some don't. And I try to cater to that, but the ones that really like the physical part, we spend a lot of time working between just the abstract body. What does the body do when you're thinking of these?
And are you using that as a way to express an inner reality of the character, or is it more about the visual movement on stage and keeping it flowing?
It depends. I did a project 2 years ago with an actor who has a clown background. It was a very serious play. It was a little short play that we did as part of a festival. We spent almost no time on the actual text. We would go through and pick a word that was in the text, and then we would spend 2 hours exploring that word physically.
Wow, that sounds awesome.
And she would do whatever she wanted. And then we would come back together and talk about what we felt and how that word and why the playwright, who was also there in the rehearsal process, why the playwright chose that word. And the playwright herself sometimes didn't know.
Right, yeah.
Almost always didn't know why she had used that word, but we worked in a really, really abstract way on that project, which was a lot of fun for all three of us.
Cool. And I guess you mentioned clowning. Clowning around is pretty serious, right? There's the French school and so that's fascinating.
And I know I've had the chance to work with different clowns. I don't know a lot about the theory, but the little bit that I do know, I try to bring those people in. So sometimes they'll lead workshops with the actors.
Yeah. It sounds like it's got a lot of potential for amazing therapeutic practices as well. It's like getting things out of you in certain ways that you're not used to doing. It sounds like a great thing to do.
I would think so. I try to steer away from any therapy because that's not what we're doing.
Right.
So we're very clear. Although I agree with you, and I think there's all kinds of therapeutic uses for those types of processes. We're very clear when we go in that we're not going that deep.
Okay. Yeah.
Because I don't have the training to deal with something. So we always stop if something's going to become too much for somebody. But people do go into places.
Yeah, it's like even like improv classes and that sort of thing, where it's the idea is it's not necessarily to learn how to act or to have a career in it, but people often take that just because it's a personal enrichment. So it's fascinating. But I guess theatrical plays are such that is it accurate to say that it has a diminishing audience, or is there some kind of a, because I mean, like, I just, before we came down here, I closed the back window which goes onto the laneway here. And last night, I don't know what I was doing, but I just heard a bunch of screaming in the back laneway, and I thought, "What's going on?" I turned all the sound down, and there's some game on or something. So I turned on the TV, and the Blue Jays had just won. Yeah. So it seemed like the whole neighborhood was kind of tuned into that cultural event, but you don't see that kind of tuning into some of the things that that we're doing. Yeah.
It's hard for me to say because, again, I live in a bit of a bubble. So most of the shows that I'm interested in seeing, I usually have trouble getting tickets for.
Oh, really?
Things sell out. Things do fairly well, but I also know that artists don't make a living at being artists here. Actors do other things, a lot of them. There's not a lot of actors making a great living at that.
Starving artists.
And the stuff that I do struggles anyway. It's independent theater. It's not sort of the mainstream stuff, and which is what I want to be doing.
Oh, but really?
This is by design to stay with this independent sort of kind of emerging artists. That's who I like to work with. So they go off. The ones I work with go off and do interesting things after they worked with us, but.
Yeah. So when you say, so you'd rather be doing or thinking ahead to doing more mainstream accessible works? Because, I mean, how you describe it now, is it, what did you call it? Early modern and medieval theater?
This stuff, the theater company. So the thing I'm doing right now is a new play, but the most of the stuff I do is with a group called Populi Ludique Societas.
Cool. Spell that quickly.
Which is like sort of Latin for Cup and Game Society, that in 1965, a bunch of PhD students sitting around deciding to make this theater company thought was hilarious. So.
Crazy PhDs.
We're stuck with it.
Yeah.
But we've been doing it. We just did 50 years. We just did our 50th anniversary.
50? Wow. So where did this start, this group you mentioned?
1965 at the University of Toronto.
Oh, so it was a U of T thing. Oh, wow.
And the PLS comes from Professor Lyerly's seminar. And so they thought they would come up with something. I don't know. They were sitting around drinking beer. This is the the mythology of the beginnings of our company.
Cool. And so the current project that you're just working on, you mentioned, was about the Sri Lankan community, or the Tamil community in Toronto.
Yes.
That's kind of cool. Yeah.
It is cool. I'm on a huge learning curve at the moment, trying to catch up with all of that. So that's actually at Alumni Theater, which is a theater company that also has beginnings with U of T. Just was around the 1900s was created, and it was created for women. It's a women-based theater company, and it's a fantastic place that encourages young playwrights and young actors to write and produce their own stuff.
Do you have any interest in writing plays? No?
None at all.
None at all? Really?
Absolutely none at all.
That's interesting.
I never have a desire to write. I love editing stuff. And I think the directing job is the exact same sort of thing. It's like being an editor. It's sort of crafting something that's already there, sort of honing it and bringing it to life.
So where would you want to be in 5 years within this world? What are you looking forward to or hoping to happen?
I'm actually really happy where I am because I'm doing exactly what I want to be doing. Yeah. I think I would like to do more monologue coaching. As I do this and I sit through these, we do open auditions because the idea at Alumni is to give young people, especially women, but not just women, the chance to get some experience. So a lot of them are just out of school. Some people have never taken classes. They still get to audition.
So I could go and audition for something?
Good.
Yeah. Okay.
Yep.
Cool.
There's auditions coming up in January.
I might just do that.
Yeah. I encourage you to.
It's like, I don't know if everybody thinks this, but maybe everybody does. They think, I could act, but I guess the proof is in the pudding.
It's not easy.
It's not as easy as
it's not easy.
I'm sure it's not.
I'm trained and not that great.
Yeah, you did some acting in the past.
Yeah, I did start out wanting to be an actor. And then everything I was in, I kept thinking, why is the director doing this? Why don't you do this? Why don't you? And all the other actors in the shows were like, you should be a director.
Right. And that's kind of the clue, right? It's how you perceive and take in and experience. Like when I watched a lot of TV as a kid and a lot of comedy. And I realized that I was watching it like the writer more than anything else, because you see something happen and you laugh and you think, oh, I might have written it slightly different this way, or, oh, that's cool that he did that, and there's kind of a riff on this. So you realize, oh, I'm viewing it like a writer, so I must be a writer in some sense. Whereas if you're looking at maybe the intonations of the actors and stuff, you could think, oh, I'm an actor. But so you definitely got that clue that you're the director.
Yeah, early on, and made me much happier directing. I just didn't have the self-confidence. I didn't think anybody would listen to me.
Right. Because it's a very autocratic kind of a position.
It can be. Right? I'm not like that. It's interesting. Most of the actors, I think they like working with me. A lot of them come back and work with me again. It's hard to say because I'm not a dictator. So some actors don't like that. They want to. They like more clear lines. But I'm very collaborative. So.
But sorry, go ahead.
No. So it creates a different type of atmosphere, and it took me a long time to understand that you can be like that. You don't, and it again goes back to that idea of having the confidence to not know.
Right, and let it happen.
Yeah, and that's hard.
It's funny, you touched on something interesting there, in that the way some people react to the type of directing, whether it's authoritarian or not, and this is true of maybe in politics, it's true with children, maybe it's true with dogs, in that some like to be shown the way, and others want to have complete free form and association, allowing the freedom to do that. So it seems like the world is kind of half and half split with that.
Yeah.
And you see that, like anytime you have the kind of a political disputes going on, and I'm familiar with Canada's politics, politics of Turkey, politics of the U.S., and it's always like a 50-50 split where half the people are okay with being told everything what to do and have a strong leader, and the other people are saying, fuck you, I'm going to do whatever the fuck I want. So it's like there's a inherent human nature that's kind of at play there, whatever that might mean. Do you see that?
I have this theory personally that cultures or societies need that. We sort of need to swing back and forth. They're supposed to, I don't know, have you been following Jordan Peterson's stuff on, anyway?
No, go on. What is that about? Yeah.
He's a psychology professor at U of T. Okay. He studies this stuff. He's the guy that this week decided that non-binary gender doesn't exist.
I saw the headline. I didn't link on it. So what's that all about? So he doesn't want to use it in his classroom. Is that the idea? Or?
He's denying that it exists, and he feels that he shouldn't be forced to use a third gender pronoun.
It's funny because I'm obviously I would always err on the side of increased freedom. So I don't like to oppress people and tell them how to think or talk or whatever. But really, I mean, what are you getting so upset about? Something like that? Like, it just seems kind of an odd thing to focus on and be sensitive to. It's like, so what? Some people want to hear multiple different types of gender pronouns, and go with it. What's the big deal?
I think what he's objecting to is it's a requirement within the policies of the University of Toronto, and legally he's required to do that, to make accommodation, which he's and I think that he's right to find that problematic. And the reason I'm picking this person up is from that question that you're asking about, sort of people who are all-encompassing and like the collaborative world, and other people who want authoritarian. His research is about that, the cognitive styles of the two different types of people. And he has got a theory that evolution picked these two types of people to work together because you need you can't go forward if you're constantly having everything structured and having rules. But if you're too free form, then things start to fall apart. So you need to have the types of people that have structure in their, or want structure or desire structure. And those two things together make a vibrant democracy. So he's an interesting sort of provocateur type of character. I'm a little bit like right now at the moment, everybody's mad at him because he's being a bit of a he's being a bit belligerent about it. But I think the underlying concept of allowing there to be a space to have that conversation is important.
Yes.
At the same time, I think, transgender is done. We're done. We've accepted it, and I don't think we need to keep talking about it. Right. So,
and you do some teaching as well. Do you come across that kind of a issue when do you find yourself choosing your words? Is it something that,
I haven't had to deal with. I've had to deal with accommodation for students, which I don't have a problem with at all. And I do trigger warnings. I teach in film departments, so sometimes we're showing really violent stuff to students, and I tell them. In fact, I didn't give a trigger warning one day. All I did was show a Joe Fresh, is the advertising class I was teaching. I showed a Joe Fresh ad, and then CBC footage of the Bangladeshi fire, and then back to the Joe Fresh, and back. And after I edited all that together, and I was watching it, I turned around, and a lot of people were really upset and disturbed. They didn't ask me not to do it again, but I was a little bit shocked that that it had such an impact. So I did notice that. I probably would have, if I'd expected that, just said, we're going to look at something that might shock you.
But on the other hand, it seems like, it's an interesting reaction that they had, that they were clearly emotionally affected by it, but they didn't want you to stop. No. So I think that's actually the best you could hope for.
It was a learning, I'm also keenly aware, if you've got 70 students in your classroom, that there's going to be a handful of people that have experienced some of the things that they're going to look at when you're doing something in visual culture. Sometimes you need to warn people. And, I've had students who've seen their families blown up in terrorist attacks. That's a thing that professors today, I'm not a professor, but that's something that we are dealing with. Those are the people in our classrooms. So 20 years ago, 40 years ago, it can't be the way it was before.
Right.
Because you are going to have people in your classroom, guaranteed, who've gone through something. So
that's true. I guess there's definitely a backlash against that in some sense. Well, like any kind of cultural change tends to produce the kind of a backlash. And you see that, but it's usually with men. They're the ones that are giving this backlash about, basically calling people weak for, having to be given trigger warnings and everything like that. But
I've seen it with progressive women.
Oh, yeah?
Yeah. So I see it. The trigger warning thing has a bad rap. It's in the sort of mainstream media. And it's not something that I or anyone I know, including, I know a lot of professors, they're not experiencing this thing that you keep reading about.
Oh, really?
In the news, like The Atlantic, saying that they're not resilient. Their students aren't resilient. I think they're dealing with more than they've ever dealt with before. And
maybe, yeah. And also, this brings us back to this dissing of the millennials,
which is my pet peeve.
Yeah, no, I think they're great.
Yeah, I have not experienced any of the things that other people, and I'm around them a lot because I work with them in theater. That's who I work with. They're mostly young actors that have just graduated from school and are starting their careers. So, and I teach them.
Cool.
So I'm around them a lot, and I don't have. I find everybody. If anything, I find them. We've been joking about that. They're really locked and loaded. Like when I graduated, we're Gen X.
Yeah.
We really
knew what the fuck we were doing.
We were not locked and loaded.
Just get out there and see what happens.
That was exactly it. I was like, I don't know, send my resume, see what I get. But they're really, really focused and
Yeah.
career oriented, and I'm always constantly saying, "Have fun! Like, where's
They're
the
having
fun?"
families. Like I noticed, like in my neighborhood here in the Junction, there was an influx of the coiffed bearded kind of hipsters, but you see them pushing baby carriages, and my generation kind of skipped over that. We didn't really
sure did.
get into it, but it's like the younger people have bought into it. Kind of a surprising development there.
Yeah. Well, they're a big demographic, right? This is It's interesting. I guess you probably have the same thing, being an insignificant demographic sitting between these two behemoths who are constantly telling each other that they suck.
Yeah.
We're sitting here going,
yeah. But one of the things that they say about these millennials is that they're not so much interested in owning things, but they're more interested in owning experiences, which kind of might be lend itself to theatrical experience. I wonder if they're buying into that. Have you noticed? Or is it a bunch of geezers like us?
Definitely the demographic for the medieval stuff is older than us. It's 60s plus, tends to be. Unless we do every 5 years we do a big festival. We did one last year. That then people with children come because it's outdoors, it's outdoor theater, and it's something that people associate with children. But our sort of like sit-down theater audience, and I think the subscription audiences at all of the mainstream theaters in Toronto are seniors.
Yeah, I guess.
But I'm talking out of my butt here. I don't actually have demographics on that. It's just sort of what I've observed.
Get a sense for it. Yeah. I can't remember the last time I went to a theatrical play, so maybe I'm just old enough now I can start.
I don't go as much as I should either, and part of that is I think it's the getting older bit. I just get home at night and I don't feel like going out.
Right. Yeah.
I'm just gonna sit here. To
melt into the couch. Yeah. You mentioned opera is another interesting kind of a cultural world that I know little about and don't fully understand. And I went to a Wagner opera last year, a couple of years ago, and I went in with an open mind and I appreciated, the music was wonderful. Obviously, a genius at play there. And it was Adam Agoyan that was doing one of the Ring cycles pieces. And but what kind of threw me was, they have the super titles, and they're essentially translating what they're singing, and then you realize it's pretty goofy. They're just. With this incredible emotion and a burst of energy, they're saying, I'm walking up the stairs, like expository dialogue. And I didn't really expect that. That was kind of weird. Is that, do you pay attention to what they're saying when you listen to it?
Well, I glance up at the surtitles. I don't want to get too caught up in them, but because I don't, and again, it's like a pastime thing. And again, sort of, I have a ton of friends and people who study opera and know all kinds of things about opera, whereas I'm one of those people who, if you don't know about this, you can go on Tuesdays and get rush tickets and I'll just buy whatever ticket is there. So I know nothing about it. I know what's in the program, and I just sort of like the music and the staging. Staging for me is the big deal with opera. That's one of the reasons that I like it so much. I like it's less about what's getting said and rather than how it's being said. Right.
Yeah. And we mentioned something a little earlier with this Nietzschean, Dionysian, Apollonian thing, and Wagner plays into that because he was kind of a hero to Nietzsche at first.
Yes. Yeah.
There was that.
Yeah. Well, those artists. And then they got involved. The wife got involved.
He was hot for Cosima Wagner. So that kind of threw a wrench in it. But and it kind of applies this notion that you have to have the two, the creative forces in nature, but also human nature that plays itself out. And one of them is being the Apollonian is something like rigidity and structure and words and text. And then you have the other side, which we were just talking about, where it's the emotions in the body playing itself out. But I think we all kind of recognize, whether it's conscious or not, that the great artworks are the interplay of both of them. Yes. And this is what he said in like Birth of Tragedy. It's like a dance between the two. So you're conscious of this when you're And is that when you're choosing a play to direct, how do you, like, what is it you're looking for?
I very rarely choose my plays.
Oh, really? Okay. How does that work?
So I'm in a kind of a funny position. Unless I really don't like a play, I won't direct something. I directed something last year I didn't like, and I won't do it again. Okay. But usually what happens is producers have, so what happened with the one I'm doing right now, the producers had chosen this play that they're going to produce, and then they went and looked for a director. So they sent the script out to a bunch of different directors, and we pitched our ideas. And I happened to get this one. With the medieval one, I have a little bit more say, but obviously there's only so many texts available, and they're a certain type of thing. They tend to be hooked into somebody's research interest. Oh, okay.
So it still has a kind of an academic connection.
The medieval stuff is, it's research based theater. It's theater research. So
what kind of a crazy producer decides to put on a medieval play? What's going
they
on
tend to be, all of my producers are academics.
Right.
For that. So the plays that we did last year, what have we done? Well, this year I didn't direct. We sent a show to England, which was Mankind, which is a play that gets taught in all undergrad courses for your survey English course. So that was one of the things that we decided we wanted to have, and we'll make a video of it and have it available for students, I'm hoping. And then Pride of Life, which is this other fragment of a play that the director, so he's an academic, he's a professor at U of T, also a professional director. He got the funding, and he wanted to do this improv devised version of this play that we only have a fragment of. So,
cool. That sounds fun.
He took that on the road, and that's sort of what we did. So that it gets born out of whoever's doing some sort of research. So I think the ones that we're doing next year, because one of the professors is doing children in the Middle Ages, or that's part of a conference that's coming up. So we'll be doing a play hooked into that. So.
Yeah, I guess I wonder how similar it is to film, which I have some experience in. It's usually driven by the writing and a director. Then they kind of have to convince a producer essentially to take on the project. But on
the indie side,
on the indie side, that's true.
Yeah, on the other side, the producers find the directors, because directors get fired.
That's true. And they're, in indie projects, the director's kind of at the top of the totem pole, but in the big productions, they're just menial labor sometimes. Yeah. They just come in but because there's a lot of, for me, when I'm attracted to a movie, it's most often the director and the writing. It's those two that I think are great films. It's based on that. Any directors do you see a crossover in theatrical directing and film directing, or do you any that you find theatrical?
I think probably some of the more auteur type directors. I think like what you're saying, there's a creative, not just creative, but part of shaping and forming the movie when you're the director, especially if you get a say in the edits. And that's why we get director's cuts of things, and we fetishize the director's cut because of the role that we think the director has.
And sometimes that turns out awful. Like sometimes the director needs reining in, right?
They often are, It's like writers need editors and directors need...
Yeah. We're back to this dance again between the rigidity of structure and the inspiration of artistic creativity. Yeah, and you got to find both.
Yeah, exactly. So good producing is a part of the whole process. So you have a creative producer who has a sense of what audiences will sit through, because you've got to also be, if you're dealing with commercial things.
Productions. It's funny. Well, the way I've been involved in film is as an executive producer most of the time. So whenever possible, I would err on the side of the director or the writer, and it's usually it's the same person that's writing and directing. Although you have the power as an executive producer to put your view and changes that you want in there, but I mean, you got to trust the artist in some sense with the small projects anyway. Maybe if you're investing $100 million, you might think differently.
You're looking at a lot of different things.
Yeah.
I haven't done a lot of, I'm not that interested in film directing, even though I end up teaching in that somehow or another, because of the way things worked. There's a film studies program now at U of T, but there wasn't when I was doing my PhD. So that's how I sort of ended up.
Like a graduate program in it? Okay, yeah, because they had undergraduate and I got a minor in it when I was there.
Yeah, but they didn't have a graduate. They do now. So that's how that's how I ended up doing film. My master's thesis was on feminist film theory. So I know a little bit about film that way. But it was always because it was the closest thing I could cheat into that was like theater. And so that's how that's worked. But
that's at Innis College?
Yeah.
I remember that. That was fun. Those days. You could just went to class and watch movies.
And watch movies. However, it's a tough class. It is a tough class. A lot of the students, there were over 400 in the class the year I TA'd for them, and there were a lot of kids who took it thinking, you're just going to watch movies all day, get an easy credit. There was a lot of complaining about the essays. I told them this is why I went back into theater, because film's too hard.
So how were those films chosen in that course? You were a TA, so did you have any input into that?
Not really. At the time, it was, what's his name? Charlie. Do you remember his name?
No, there was a Bart Testa when I was there.
Bart Testa was the professor I worked for,
Oh, okay.
So he created the lectures, but I think it's part of a survey course, so it goes over the full year. And we looked at a lot of films. There's a textbook that's hooked into it. That's sort of the textbook that everybody starts out with. And,
that was great. I enjoyed those.
We get a nice survey of things. But the thing you were saying about the writer-director thing, I think like Martin Scorsese is one of my favorite directors. So he's somebody, the auteur style director. He edits in the camera, but he works with playwrights, and Hitchcock did that too. He would find playwrights and hire them, but he didn't do screenwriters. Right. They don't do the exact actual writing. They might be the artistic person behind it. But they're not the actual writers. And I think there's something, my experience of working with live playwrights, which is a completely different beast from what I normally do, is I can show them things that are in their scripts that they didn't know were there.
Oh, yeah.
So I wonder what happens if you've got a director who writes their own stuff and isn't getting a lot of input from outside.
That's a good question.
You're not growing... Because the thing is bigger. Once it's on paper or on a medium, it is in the world, and it is a
solidified
thing.
In some sense. It's manifested already.
But it's alive too, right? And it's got, so everybody who reads it, we're talking about cones in your eyes and perception. Everybody's going to bring a different thing to this thing that you've brought to life. And I think if you're too close to it and you hold it too close and don't let other people sort of have some input,
I think you're right.
It doesn't mean it's not great. It just means it might not have the full life it could have. I don't know.
In films in particular, it's become very difficult to make films that are, kind of middle range films, the kind of films that I was involved with. It seems like you need to have like $100 million superhero film or something like a passion project that's under $1 million, and a lot of people are working for free. But when you look at theatrical presentations, it doesn't seem like it requires a lot of expense to do that. So where does the money come from?
No idea. Donors, grants. And there isn't a lot. Like, we do a lot with very little, which I like. Yeah. I like not having a whole lot. I would like more money than I have. But
what?
But I like having to figure out how to solve a problem.
Sure.
So if I had everything, I plan things out as much as I plan things out, or I visualize things like as if I had $1 million and I could do whatever I wanted. And then I present these things to my designers, who are actually the creative people, who say, well,
no way.
Well, what if you did this?
Right.
And so we all solve problems together. And that makes it more interesting. And Robert Lepage says that about his films, that he likes, because he got some funding, and every time there was a problem, they kept wanting to throw money at it, and he was like, no, I don't want to solve it with money. I want to solve it.
It's kind of like restraining yourself in order to, I mean, what was it, the Dogma? Have you heard of the Dogma 95? It was Lars von Trier, Danish filmmakers, and I forget, Winterberg, I think. They started this, they had this idea that, what if we restricted the way we can do film? Like, for example, they said, you could only use natural lighting, there could only be one microphone, there could be no, cuts or edits, something like that. So they had these set of rules that really restricted it. And as a result, it forced them to make the film in a certain way, and that became part of that aesthetic. Yeah, and that's always a great exercise, if nothing else. But it's also a great way to save money.
Yes,
right, to do that.
It's a thing that I struggle with a lot when a problem comes up and I've got too many people. So I'm very collaborative in the rehearsal room, but then it becomes a problem for me, because I try to solve problems, and most people. I try to solve problems in creative ways, but most people want to solve problems. So they'll just say, well, why don't we cut that? Why don't we just get rid of that? Or why don't we just not do it? And I'm like, no, I don't want to do that. And it always ends up being the thing that audiences respond to, because it's magical, right? Because they're like, how are they going to deal? Oh, that's how they dealt with it, right?
It's right on that bubble, on that edge of, that's usually where the magic happens.
They want magic, right? That's what I think. I think that is why we go to theater. Well, it's why I go to theater.
Well, that sounds, about right.
It's not why people go for different things, but for me, and that's why I like opera so much. Even though I like doing indie theater, I like going to the opera. I like the big C culture. Right. I like to see big money and like that kind of magic. Do you dress up when you go to the...
No. Because you see a lot of people with their fancy gowns and stuff.
No, I don't.
That's a little odd.
But and then I also I've been going to see. I went to see Matilda the other night, which was really long for kids. And there was a woman. I think that was that Matilda. A woman showed up in a wedding dress.
What?
So wow! I guess it was her wedding. So.
Wow, that's interesting and unusual.
Yeah. So
I would have tried to talk to them. What are you doing here?
I don't know. It's great.
Cool. You also said you teach a class on advertising.
I did a class on advertising history and film and media studies at Hamburg. Yeah.
Well, that's kind of very cool. I mean, because you're getting into considerations of aesthetics and communication, semiotics, but also propaganda and changing of minds, cognitive science. It seems like you could go on and on. Like, that's pretty cool subject matter.
Yeah, it was fun. It was, again, I was taking on a course that already existed, but. So the parameters were already there, but I picked all of the content and all of the readings and the commercials that we looked at. And we had a lot of fun. It was a big learning experience for me because I didn't know anything about it either.
Oh, really?
It was like the typical teacher thing. It was like the night before. I'm reading it as fast as I can before I could go up and lecture the next day. But they knew that, and they, we had it was nice because it was collaborative. And one of the students missed an assignment, and we didn't know what to do. And he'd spent 2 years in Japan, so he said, "Can I do a lecture on Japanese commercials?" Which he did.
Well, that would have been fascinating.
And it was something I couldn't have tackled. So there was a nice that was an interesting thing to do. So on that side, and we did history. So we started in the 1800s. Oh. Right up to
1800s. You don't. For some reason, when you think of advertising, for some reason you think of like electronic media. Yeah.
So we moved because it is film and media. So we moved as quickly as we could into TV commercials. But we started at the sort of when advertising and branding and all because they needed to have all that stuff as their basis. And then of course like I said to you when we were talking before we started talking here, it is a way of teaching applied art students some critical theory.
Right.
Sneaking it in, trying to get them to think about, some Stuart Hall and some, we did Marx. Oh, and so the way I did it, we did. So every week was sponsored by a famous philosopher. So we had
neat.
This week is brought to you by Marx. And then I would do a little really short thing about Marx's theory, not too much because there is an attention span thing.
Sure.
Yeah. And then we would go through and look at different commercials or things and how is this working. And,
Well, one of the most fascinating things about looking through like old magazines or even old newsreels or whatever, is just the advertising that you see in there is amazing. Because it reveals so much that, that they have no intention of revealing in that.
Exactly.
But you can read in a lot about the social structures, about, capitalism and everything else. Marx, I guess Zizek has a field day with this kind of thing, right? Because he's looking at, what was it? The Pervert's Guide to Idealism?
Yes.
Yeah, that kind of thing where, there's a lot there if you want to dig in. So you got into that sort of thing? A
little bit. It was pretty much a survey course to get them ready for their final year. So this is a third year course, and it's meant to get them ready so that they can actually start reading these theorists.
Oh, okay.
But what they had been finding was, because it's an applied arts program, they spend a lot of their time making. And that's what I think it's the best program because they have to do thinking and making.
So they made sample TV commercials and print commercials?
We did commercials. That was their final assignment. They had to work in groups. They like working in groups. I hated that as a student, but they like it because they're filmmakers. So they had to pitch the whole thing at the end of the year after we'd studied all of these. They had to pick a theorist. They had to pitch a commercial to me.
With that theorist in mind?
With a theorist in mind. And they had to tie it into that. And then they made these really fantastic commercials. Because they know how to do this. Some of them just shot them on iPhones. And
fantastic in the sense that viewing it from the perspective of the advertiser, they would say, hey, that's a good commercial for my product.
Some of them were really, really good. They're talented. They're all off working now doing things.
It's their living now, maybe.
So hopefully they got something out of it. But we would mostly, get the structure was a little bit of an introduction to a theorist. I'd pick some commercials that from different eras that I thought sort of spoke to those things. And as they got more sophisticated with it, they could see, if we looked at commercials from today, they could start to deconstruct them, which is a skill that I think you need to be able to have.
That's just such a rich field to mine. I mean, you think commercials are, you can talk about the rhetoric, but there's two things going on. It's like there's some intellectual convincing going on, but there's a lot of, you're playing, the bodily, emotional things, and in a way, you're manipulating, obviously. Advertising is you're trying to get someone to affect a certain brain state.
It's persuasive.
And to act,
So then one of the things that was shocking to me, but if you spend any time on Facebook whatsoever, that most people don't even know basic rhetoric. Right. So this was also sort of a running theme throughout that course was they had to use proper rhetoric, and they had to be able to. It's
one of my pet peeves. I wish we could teach more of that in school.
I was shocked that they didn't know about rhetoric. It was new to them. For me, I felt I added it in about the third class because it became clear to me that they'd never encountered it before. Yeah. And
it's a defense mechanism for me. It's like if you don't know it, you're much more easily manipulated in a way. So it's a great service to the person to learn that.
Yeah. And if you're going to go in, a couple of the students ended up that you can add that program. You can add on a marketing and media or something. An extra year, you get an extra certificate. So a couple of them went into that. So they need to know how to do persuasion.
Right. And speaking of persuasion, did you ever get into political ads? And because that's kind of a different genre of ad, but in a way.
I can't remember now if we did.
You're watching any political ads? I mean, we don't really see political. We don't.
No.
I don't know. Do you watch TV? I don't really watch commercial TV. No, but I mean, I watch a lot of like HBO.
Unless somebody. So there's partisan commercials that people are putting up and saying, "Oh yeah, they really got it with this one."
Yeah, you would see it on Facebook. But I feel dirty watching some of those sometimes because it just feels like, even if I agree, it's the political candidate that I'm with, I just feel dirty about the way it's done sometimes. But it's almost like we've developed this game unconsciously of how things are done and how we play it, and everybody feels like kind of like that drug dealer that says, if I don't sell it, somebody else will. It's like you got to play the game this way if you want to win, and it's kind of a sad state of affairs where everyone's kind of racing to the bottom of how we do everything.
Yeah, and the problem is it works at a certain level, and that was the thing that when we were teaching the class, because a lot of the students, they're awesome. I love people that age because they want to change the world, and they're frustrated with the status quo, and commercials, they saw them as dirty. I don't think they came out of it thinking that, but some of them did, and it was like, but it works. This is what works. We also looked at theory of advertising, like you have to be louder, you have to repeat. That's what works. We know what works. It's scientifically proven. That's why advertisers annoy you the way they do. Right. It's not that they're bad people. This is what works.
Except that a lot of it seems to be the successful techniques are kind of built on like Goebbels propaganda from World War II. Because you kind of figured out what worked and how to manipulate people.
But this is why progressives are doing the same sorts of things. It makes you cringe.
Right.
I'm like the thing that's going on, the thing in the States that's going on right now.
That crazy thing.
I don't like the Trump memes. They're ugly and mean, and I don't like that person, but I don't need that constant, I just want, what I want to see is just constantly meeting that belligerence with calm logic, facts, which is,
But does that even work?
But the reason the memes are happening is because it works, and we know that it works with those political ads.
Yeah.
They work. The conservatives use them because they work.
Well, yeah.
The liberals use them too.
Yeah, that's true. But again, back to this idea of like the world kind of seems to be split into half of the people are totally fine with someone coming and saying, here's the answer. And others say, no, I want to think about this for myself and see if I agree with you. But I gotta say, I was the guy that was saying, oh, don't worry, the November's a really long time away. Trump is, he's got so many skeletons in the closet. I mean, it's a casino developer from Jersey. How do you not get mixed up with the mob and everything else and Russian, bankers and all that shit? So I thought, it's just a matter of time before all this comes out. But the surprise is all of this has come out, but nobody registers it and is judging it as something that's going to obviate his run for the presidency. That's kind of a fascinating thing. Yeah. And we're in our bubble on Facebook with people that we agree with. But you were saying you had some relatives that might.
So there's people in my circle that are Trump supporters. Yeah. I don't think we don't have these conversations because it's you don't really need to go there. But I think they would prefer a different Republican. Yeah. Leader, but they're going to go Republican, and they really distrust Hillary.
That is so fucked up, really. I mean, this sense of, there was a debate on last night between the two vice presidential candidates, and I watched it, and obviously I'm coming at it from kind of a progressive left of center kind of view. So I looked at it and I thought, Kane just smacked this guy around with all his ideas and everything, but all the people on CNN are coming on and saying, Pence clearly won that debate. And I realized that the reason that they were judging that to be the case was mainly more for, if you looked at Pence, he was talking like a calm conservative guy that they're, they like to see at the, at the business association or, some guy at the church that they talked on weekends. And he seemed like he was calm and he had kind of a smirk on his face. But if you listen to what he was saying, it was mostly, bullshit. But that didn't seem to register. It's like people are making these judgments about who to vote for, and these are the professional analysts on TV as well. I don't know if they're being infected by this notion that even if they don't think it, they think, well, this is how the electorate's going to respond. And the electorate's going to respond to, there's a calm, cool guy. He looks like he knows what he's doing. And, he could be my daddy. That kind of thing. Whereas Kane is throwing out all these ideas like, you shut up, nerd. It was kind of like that response.
It could be an age. It was interesting because I flipped back and forth between PBS and CBC. Mm-hmm. So the American and Canadian.
I didn't even know the CBC had it on. Yeah.
It was baseball or the debate last night. So the CBC correspondents were saying that Kane had clearly won it. It was ideas.
Yeah.
It was, and then switch over to PBS, which is also an idea-based. Yeah. It's not CNN. It's not Fox. Right. They were saying also that Pence had won. So they have two different sides. Yeah. And it had to do with demeanor and performance.
Mm-hmm. Ideas be damned, which is bizarre. It's like, again, we're back to this duality. And if you're focusing so much on the Dionysian, which is kind of what they're doing in the sense that it's, intuitively what comes up, I'm happy with this guy. I feel comfortable. They're safe.
Well, it is emotional, right? That's what I was going to say. Like, I think that we're underestimating how emotional this is. Mm-hmm. And I find it interesting because I wish I was a baseball person because I would love to be a Jays fan because I really like hockey and my team never wins. Right. And the Jays win and I try to watch it and I just don't get into it. But watching how emotional everybody was last night and having these two sort of cultural things happening at the same time. It was really interesting that how emotion plays into something that's
it's kind of overlooked. Less so in sports, but I call politics kind of sports for nerds in a way. It's just a less physical, but it's less physical in the sense of movement, but it's just as physical in terms of reaction and emotional. And I
have like all of my friends are left of center. I don't really hang around I have a couple conservative friends. I really appreciate them. Intellectual conservatives I like being friends with because they're
rare, but I do like them too.
They push your ideas. But I can see, knee-jerk, like a lot of my lefty friends are reactionary. They do play into all the exact same types of things that we accuse right-wingers of doing. And that's why you end up with people telling each other that, educate yourself or whatever weird attacks they make on you. Whenever they, So it's kind of hard. Sometimes I end up taking stances on things and finding myself feeling a little bit attacked because I'm not sort of so again I can see why someone like Peterson, who's leans right, is feeling that he's being mobbed a bit by political correctness, which is
I got to say, when I was in university in the 90s, I felt like that was kind of an early wave of political correctness, and I remember feeling it. I remember, for example, it impacting the way I dealt with the female people in my and I was always hyper conscious that became a problem in a sense. Yeah, but the thing is, when you become so hyper conscious, it becomes all cerebral cortex. Yes. You're thinking rather than responding. So I'm wondering how much of it is being diminished, and it's hard to find that balance where you want to let your true nature come up, but you want to think about it.
I think. I'm for me, political correctness is a good thing. Tripping myself up. I'm the next person on the rung as far as privilege goes. So I have a little bit of knowledge of what it's like to not be the most privileged person in the culture, but I'm mostly privileged. So it is good to sort of, language is the place where we construct ourselves as human beings and as a society. And so you disrupt language on purpose, not to police it.
Right.
But
which is what happens. But
it is what happens.
The intention is right.
Yeah. So that's sort of, I guess, the balance that we sort of try to figure out How do we do that? Like, I'm not sure that coming down and, especially with social media, everybody has to, somebody makes a slip of tongue and everybody's like shaming that person for that. That is a little bit excessive, but at the same time, it's like, yeah, I should be careful about what I'm saying.
Yeah.
Not because I don't want to hurt people or that I want to be precious, but that it actually interrupts and changes who I am as a person. I think it's got a cognitive function that serves us all well.
Can I give you an example that maybe in the eyes of some I'm guilty of doing is that I refer to the women in my life most often as girls. And it's just like, to me, that's kind of the translation of guys and girls. I just think it just sounds like guys and girls. But I can understand how some people might think it's somehow diminishing. But
I think that...
Does intention have... Because my intention is not that, obviously.
No, but, well, I think this is where it's an interesting... Language is an interesting thing. And that wouldn't bother me. But I think it would depend on who it was addressed to, and I would be, I had a friend who hated the word queer.
Oh, okay.
He's part of that culture, queer culture. I understood queer. He really hated that word. So around him, I didn't use it. Right? Because it bothered him. So it's like, it's no skin off my nose. I'll just not say it around him.
Sure.
But typically that term is sort of reclaiming the word for the culture. So I personally don't have a problem with girls and guys.
Like if I said I went on a date with a girl, I would say I wouldn't. For some reason, it seems odd to say women, but I think maybe it's just owing to my lack of wanting to grow up and sound like an adult. I don't know.
I think it's because I just recently started calling myself a woman, which still feels weird.
Why is that, I wonder?
Because it makes me feel like, wait, I'm a grown up. When did that happen?
Yeah.
So I think the more important part of it is going through the process of these things, watching what it is. It's not about policing. It's about disrupting. And what you were saying about, it's not intentional. And it's a reason I don't like when people, and this is going on with Trump, people are saying he's a racist. No, I'm not. Well, we don't know because we can't be inside of him. Right. All we can say is you say racist things.
Behaviorally, he registers as a racist.
Yes. Yes. You say things that sound racist.
Quack like a duck. Yeah.
But I can't tell you what. And I think a lot of people who don't see themselves as sexist or racist, so when somebody calls them that, it seems really abrupt and uncalled for. I think it's a lot gentler to say when you say that. It sounds,
I also think maybe as I get older, I'm able to get away with things like this a little bit more. It's like I'm just an old curmudgeonly guy at some point. Well, they used to say things like that back in the 70s, so he gets away with it. It's like the 50s guys now that are like Trump and Pence and these dudes. You like to think that it's kind of a dying breed, culturally speaking. Not.
I don't know. Then you get you find out things. There's worlds that exist that I don't know about, and then I start, something happens on social media or somebody is getting attacked by whatever group, and I just can't believe the things people think, and it makes me sad.
I was last summer. I was spent the summer on the Aegean, and I could pretty much almost see the island of Lesbos just across the water there. And while I was there, I didn't really notice until much later in the trip down there that there were all these people on rafts going, like basically where I was, more or less, just a few miles down the road. They were getting on rafts, like Syrian refugees, and crossing over to Greece. And this is where a lot of people were, drowning and everything. But you would think something like that, where it's clearly a story where there's a lot of empathy required, and poor people that you want to help because there's something that they. But it's so interesting to see that there's this. Again, it's like half the people react in fear and revulsion. Right. It's like we're being invaded, being invaded by poor people trying to get away from bullets and bombs, and it's kind of depressing sometimes to see that reaction.
Yeah, I know that. That's a big, that's a big kettle of fish.
Yeah,
that one. especially for Canada. I can't remember. This is not my own idea, but and I can't remember who brought this up with me, but Canada is in a kind of a unique space in the world because we don't have immigrants flooding over our borders.
Right.
So I don't think we quite understand. I don't think we're able to really participate in this conversation in a way that,
you might be right.
Even the Americans, like they are dealing with a border where people come across it in great numbers, and they're trying to deal with that. And I think it's a lot easier for us as a culture to kind of say, oh, well, you're racist, you're this, you're that.
You're right, yeah.
But we don't have it. We vet everybody that comes. It's very hard to get here without, kind of being stopped by somebody.
That's true. So you're not going to get on a raft across the Atlantic. So that doesn't happen.
We're not dealing with the same kind of issues that Germany is having. There's the borders are a little bit more fluid, and so it's harder to keep people out. It's very easy for us to keep people out, which is one of the reasons that we should be the ones letting people in, because it's easier for us to keep them out.
And we have a lot of room to assimilate.
And we've got a lot of room and will and need, and just geographically, we're probably the best country to make sure that we are safe and not letting people that we don't want in. So,
well, we might want to put a wall between us and the States. Like, we'll see what happens next month.
It doesn't matter what happens. Half of them are leaving.
That's true. Yeah, it's like real estate prices in Toronto are spiking. I wonder how much the Trump campaign has to do with that. It's like, I want to be ready.
Yeah.
Jump over. You know what? This might be a good time to take a break.
Okay, great.
All right, cool. So this tea is actually from our family tea farm.
Wow, that's cool.
Yeah, because they're part of this collective in Rize, which is northeastern Turkey.
All right.
And so all the tea farmers collect their tea, and they bring it to essentially a cooperative, and then these tea bags are made with, or not tea bag, like giant bags of loose leaf tea. And it'll say where it's from. So it's my family's, some part of it came from that same
a documentary on
field. Yeah.
On tea.
I went, well, I grew up here, but I'm originally from Turkey.
Right.
But I went back for the first time only in 2001. And I remember I actually harvested tea with a bunch of the people there. And they hire a lot of workers that come in just for the tea picking, and they go on to the next farm. But it was a lot of work. And I also noticed that women do a lot of the work, like the heavy work. Yeah. Which, for some reason you just assume the men are carrying these large bales, but it's the women that are going up and down the hills carrying these giant, like literally, 4 or 5 times the size of their body.
Wow. On
their back, just filled with tea leaves, and they're carrying it to a truck, and then the truck is filled up like 6 times the size of the truck with the tea overflowing the edges, and then we go up these rickety mountainside roads to get up to this tea processing thing.
Wow.
And what you do there is they weigh your truck and full, and they weigh it empty. And then depending on how many, like hundreds of pounds of tea you have, I don't know what the ratio was, but if you have like 100 pounds of loose tea, they give you like a 1 pound packaged and finished thing as payment for it. It wasn't even cash. Like it's like, and so all of a sudden you have all of these tea growers end up with boxes and boxes of finished packaged tea that then they try to sell to the stores. Right. It's a strange economics that's going on, but it's an old system that just continues.
See, now that sounds like an interesting documentary.
It could be, yeah.
To me,
Mm-hmm.
I watch tons of documentaries about grapes and wine. Like, why not tea?
Right. Yeah, no, that's not a bad idea. I started a documentary a few years ago, but it's not finished.
When I first met you,
did we talk about that?
You had just started it, I think. Yeah. Basketball.
Yeah, it's called Dunk. Yeah, right. And maybe I'll go back to it one day. But I love those kind of documentaries in the sense that even if you have a documentary about tea or whatever it might be, it's like such a simple subject matter. But once you start on it, you get onto all these tangents and the little pathways here and there. You talk about idealism and culture and gender studies and everything else kind of goes into it. Like, why are the women carrying the tea?
Exactly.
That sort of thing.
Well, I mean, that's what I consume mostly. We were talking about reading earlier, and documentaries are my absolute favorite type of visual.
Yeah.
So PBS, TVO, all that. And I love that. I've never made a documentary, but I love the process, and I know people who make them and the research and trying to put something into 1 hour, 90-minute package and how much you can teach and how much you can learn about the world. Like just the way you were describing that to me sounds like I'm just like
going off in all directions.
I was just thinking, there's so many cultural things. Like this is a whole thing I don't even know about.
And visually, it's very, very
and it
cool
must be
too.
Beautiful.
Because everything's going on hillsides, so there's no flat.
It sounds like a documentary filmmaker's.
What am I thinking? That's the thing. It's always right in front of your eyes, and you don't even notice it. Maybe I should go back there and do that. And also, documentaries are great because it kind of appeals to my laziness in a sense that you don't really need a lot of planning in the one sense that, I mean, you can go and shoot like 200 hours of footage and you're bound to find something in there that you can put together cohesively in a narrative after the fact. And that's appealing to me because it's a pain in the ass to try and figure all that out in advance, right? But with the theatrical, you got to figure everything else before you put it on the first time.
Yeah.
Yeah.
But not at the... I don't know how different it is because it's still discovery.
Right.
The process is, so today we'll do our first read through. The actors will meet each other for the first time.
Oh, wow. That's got to be an important moment.
Yeah. And get a sense of what they think of the script, their ideas, who they are. And then the next 5 weeks will just be... 4 weeks will be discovery. 1 week will be me.
So 4 weeks of discovery. What does that mean? Like every day for like a work week, or what is that? How often?
I haven't quite. We'll be figuring that out today too.
Okay.
This is a really short rehearsal period for this type of theater. Usually it's like 2.5 if you're professional, full-time weeks, 3 weeks in Ontario. Quebec gets way, way, way more. They get to develop their stuff. They get funding, and they're better at funding their arts. So we're doing kind of a short rehearsal process, but
like a truncated version.
Yeah, so it'll be hopefully four sort of sections per week for the next 4 weeks.
Fascinating. Yeah, I think I'll take you up and maybe audition for something at some point in the near future. Yeah, that's one of the things on my...
And men in our age group in that level of theater are a rare commodity.
Oh, really?
So
Good. All right. Supply and demand. I'm in.
Definitely.
String together a few words. You're in.
Yes, pretty much.
Yeah, lowered expectations.
Yeah. It's casting... can sometimes be like dating.
Yeah. How is your dating going? I noticed on Facebook you would occasionally refer to like online dating experience.
I had to take a break from that.
Yeah. What was happening?
It just it is an interesting. Again, there's a whole bunch of very odd people out there.
Oh, right. It's an opportunity to run into them.
And it's apparently both sides because I end up making nice friends. So go out on a date and then we're like, there's nothing here, but you're nice. So we hang out. And so they tell me their stories and they're exactly the same.
Oh, really? Yeah.
So women are as crazy as men when it comes to dating.
Well, it felt like, because I've tried online dating as well. And some of the women that I said women, I didn't say girls.
Because they're not people you know.
Yeah, maybe that's it. Yeah, because it's kind of an affectionate thing for me to say girl. Anyway, so I came across a lot of stories of really bad experiences that they were having with men. It's like I was very embarrassed to be a man. Some of the stories are like it seems like a terrible situation.
It can be. I think you just get good at just blocking people. And I'm on there right now. I don't really actively, but every now and then somebody emailed me. So some guy said something to me and he was like 30.
Wow.
I was like, yeah, no, that's okay. He wrote back to me. He's like, what? I'm not good enough for you? Is it because I'm black?
Man.
And I was like, and then I was like, I didn't even look at your pictures. I just saw 30. I was like,
well, that's not cool. Yeah.
So, and then, I've been gotten into verbal abusive things with guys. And I think but I hear women do it too. I think because there's a self-confidence thing and you can get really, really, at the beginning of this like dating thing, when I tried it, I was really serious about it and so I was just as bad as everybody else. I'm like,
tight. Yeah.
Why aren't you answering me? What's wrong with me? It's got to be me. Now I'm just like, it's kind of funny.
Yeah. So has it worked out for you? Overall, would you say it's...
Not yet.
So success would be that you have like a permanent partner?
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
I see.
I think so. But
I don't know what the hell.
I don't know how to... I don't think that's a great way for meeting people. And I don't think that's... Every romantic relationship I've ever had in my life has happened organically. You're either working together. Usually it's by having conversations around politics or art or something.
So if there's a meeting of minds and a meeting of...
you're around each other more than once. It's not this sort of artificial thing where you're...
I agree. That would be better. The reason I was with the same girl for over 20 years and... started at the age of 19. And when that was over, I realized that everybody I knew, she knew. Yeah, so if there's any way for me to move on, how am I ever going to meet anybody? So I had to, try online dating. And what I came across was a lot of very put together, smart women that frankly was a little frightening because they seem too normal. It's like I'm kind of all over the place. They're going to think I'm nuts, compared to the stability that they seem to have. So I think there's a lot more great choice for the men than there are for the women, from what I can see. Yeah.
Maybe.
Yeah.
I don't know. I don't feel that put together, so maybe that's the problem. Maybe I did my research. So I looked at other women. That's always a funny thing too.
Oh, so you look at from the other end. Yeah, I never bothered to do that.
I looked at some women's profiles, and then like a lot of times they contacted me and asked me out.
Oh, really?
And I was like, I was not expecting that.
So, hold on. So you're there as a...
Yeah, I just was like, I'm going to look at women and see what they're saying.
Interesting.
And so I was like, this is interesting.
So they contact you knowing that you're a woman? Mm-hmm. Cool. It's to be friends, or is this kind of it's like, hey, I never thought about going by, but maybe there's an opportunity.
I don't know what. A couple of them propositioned me. So
amazing.
Like, So
that could be fun.
That's interesting. So...
Cool.
Not ready for that in my life, but
you have Persephone.
I have Persephone.
Cute dog.
That's a lot of Yeah, she hogs the bed.
There you go.
She talks in her sleep.
Yeah.
She snores. So
like Scooby-Doo.
Yeah, pretty much. She barks in her sleep. So so I don't have answers for the dating thing, but it's an interesting. It's an interesting thing on that, like the Facebook thing, which I think is how we've sort of stayed in touch over the last couple of years.
Yeah.
Because people are constantly posting dating advice articles on my timeline.
Oh, really?
And I'm like, so I asked one of my. He's a millennial. He's a friend. He's a student of one of my friends, but we're friends. And so I just private messaged him and said, "What made you think of that?" And he said, "Politics and dating. That's what I think of you."
Interesting. And how do you feel about that?
I just think I didn't see myself that way, but I guess I just find the whole dating thing hilarious.
Yeah. Do you think there's a kind of a defensive mechanism there? Because it's, it's very vulnerable to go out there. So it's very easy. I mean, it makes sense and we laugh at it. Yeah. But, deep down we want something, to work out. But, you make fun of it so that if it doesn't hurt so much. But it's so funny because you get a city like Toronto, there's so many, wonderful, great people, but everyone's just walking around lonely. And
it seems
kind of
like
bizarre.
I don't quite know why. And some of it has to do with age, because I just can't put up with what I would have put up with when I was younger.
Especially with all the man-child behaviors.
I've been married twice, so
was it twice?
I married two really great guys, so I have great taste in men. I just don't stay with them. I was a bit of a problem, so that's been an interesting thing.
Oh, so why would you? What do you mean?
This has been a tough sort of 5 years to come out on the other side of it and go, wow, I was a real jerk.
Oh, wow.
I was looking for, I'm a nice person. I mean, I did nice, but what I was looking for, I was a jerk in relationship, as I thought that the guy's role was to fix everything.
Oh, really? Okay.
And I was really angry with them for not doing it.
That's fascinating, because I found that a lot of the conflicts that I had with the women in my life in the past was that I was always trying to fix things.
And
a lot of women complain about that.
Cultural. I think that is old. That's the other problem. Yeah. So it's frustrating to think, I have a master's degree in communication and cultural studies. I'm supposed to know this stuff.
Right. Good luck. Nobody knows what we're doing.
And at the end of it, I'm like, I'm a total product of my culture. I was expecting, and they had that expectation on themselves too. So you end up in this dynamic where they never feel good enough, and they're not performing what I think they should be performing. They're not. And now, I'm like, I'm just as bad. I don't get stuff done. I don't put the recycling out right when it needs to get put out. Like, why was I being so
cast the first stone?
It drove me nuts. And now I'm like, oh no, I get why you'd leave the recycling for 3 days.
Cool.
So,
does your potential mate have to love dogs?
I would think so.
Yeah, because there's certain deal breakers, right, with people.
Yeah, I'm trying to think.
Like, what if you dated somebody and they didn't like dogs? Like, not even ambivalent, but they said, I don't like dogs. That would you'd have to think that fundamentally there's something too different about the person. I don't know. Is that...
I think so.
There are little cues that we get, right?
I think it's the same, like for me, it's difficult. I like children, but I'd rather not be somebody's mom. That's a choice I made in my life. I think it's kind of similar. So when I meet, I think one of the barriers I'm bumping into is the type of guys who want to be in a relationship often have children, because they're the type of people who want to have a family. Right. And I chose not to be anybody's mother. Right. And I tried dating people with children, and it's not a good fit for me. So that gets in the way. Yeah,
because you're buying into this whole package that you're not necessarily ready for. Yeah. And this is a funny thing that comes up in my this online dating thing, because recently, probably more recently than ever, I thought maybe I would like to have children, and maybe, if I'm going to do it, I'm almost 50. I better get on it now.
You better decide.
So, but the thing is, then that kind of forces me to skew my searches to the younger women. Yeah. And then I feel creepy, but how else am I going to have children? Like, I can't necessarily date people my age in their 50s if I'm planning to do that. So that throws a whole other wrench in the thing, Does that come up with the men that you come across? Is it?
I would say that that's probably one of the problems, because somebody who's in my age group isn't going to, and if they've decided they're ready now, they're going to be dating me.
Right. Wow. That's
even if I was younger, you wouldn't be dating me.
Because that's not your intention.
It's not a choice that I want to make. So it's sort of off the table. So, and that is a problem with family-oriented people are going to want children together. So
right. And what about your family life? What was that? What was that like?
It was pretty. It makes sense. There was a lot of upheaval, and my mom was married a couple times, and I left home at 16.
Oh wow! So, that's pretty intense.
Yeah, it was like I came here because I wanted to be in Toronto, and I went to an arts school. So it's not like as dire as I didn't run away from home, but I just was ready to
So
go.
you came to Toronto and went to an art high school? Is
yeah.
that?
I went to an alternative high school in Etobicoke, yeah. And I'm a high school dropout.
Oh, you are? How did that happen? Then somehow you ended up
I just
with
didn't
a master's
finish.
and a
Yeah,
PhD.
yeah.
Can that work? That's great.
Thanks to York.
Oh, right.
Yeah,
so, yeah, a
I was
certain
able
number
to get in as
yeah.
a mature student. Yeah.
And that's the way it should be, really, because there's so much, reliance on all these grades and everything else. And we see what happens here. You got all these cohort of students that are great at taking tests, but they might not know what the fuck they're doing most of the time. And we've skewed the system that way. But I guess you don't get that in the arts as much. It's not about test taking.
Well, you have to. I mean, there has to be ways of. There's essays and tests. I don't do tests just because I don't like making them, so I don't give exams.
Right.
But that's more laziness on my part than I'm sure that I could get people to. I had to write exams all through university on various things.
Were you a good student, or did you?
I'm a terrible student, but but I get good grades really easily.
Right.
But I have terrible habits.
But that's, I guess it's a form of efficiency. Like you figured out how to get the most with the least effort.
Yes. Lazy, smart, lazy. Yeah.
That works well.
Yeah.
You could go far in the world that way.
Yeah, I had a student who was smart, lazy, drove me nuts because he was really, really smart, but he needed a C+ to get his degree, and he knew it, so he would hand in C+ work.
Oh man, yeah,
and it was just like
potential, but
he doesn't, he wants to go make movies or films or something, so he didn't need to hand in A papers and kill himself. So
I wonder about these students now, because I mean, there's a lot changing in terms of the labor market, and you see that with the technological advancements. There's just less need and requirement for people to do physical labor, for one, and then all kinds of other creative and intellectual jobs are actually going to be taken over by artificial intelligences as well. Maybe not theater directors. That might be one of the last things that.
I mean, theater directors are actually fairly new in the world. Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah, I mean, they're just over 100 years, I think.
Oh, okay. So during Shakespeare's era, what was going on then?
The lead actor would have sort of directed, and playwrights, they sort of were more collaborative. There wasn't sort of this auteur eye that they had kind of stage managers or company managers that did kind of those roles. But the idea of a director coming in and interpreting a script and making it into something is fairly new. So it's
does that come from Britain, or is it kind of like
I think it's more Russian?
Anglophone? It's Russian. Okay.
Get my history right.
Who's the more?
It's been a while since my comps.
Right. Yeah, it would take a culture of control freaks
to make sense. I'm pretty sure
to instill that.
Edit that bit out when all my theater professors are.
No edits.
I did my comps in 2007 or something. It's been a while. So I think art will always be around, but I don't know that authoritarian entities in art will stick around.
That's a good point. Yeah. But, I can imagine that there's already people doing this. They're feeding like Google's AI with like trailers of films, for example, and then they ask them to make a trailer for a horror film or something like that. And they do remarkably interesting. I mean, this is very early days. Yeah. So I could imagine, like in 10, 20 years, you have AIs that have maybe written, directed, and produced.
Maybe depends on what
this film, and maybe music also. I can imagine, in 20 years we have pop stars that are essentially artificial intelligences, and that's gonna change everything, isn't it?
I think it will. I don't know that it will change everything, because in a way we've kind of already got that. Our radio stations, pretty much everything's based on research and playlists and everything. And so the idea of the DJ is gone. But then what you do is sort of on the rise. Like I'm meeting more and more people so there's a desire to produce. I want to get away from the word authentic, but people want to be. Yeah. It has a loaded meaning, right? It has a cultural meaning that you have to be careful. I want to be careful about using, but I think people want to be close to things. Like I make bread for fun. And when you go to the bookstore, the cookbook section is all bread. People are making bread like crazy, and they're researching
Comfort
sourdough.
foods. Yeah.
I think it's a connection to... It's some sort of connection. Like, for the most part, we're going to eat out. We're going to eat fast food. But there's just sort of this ancient thing that's been around for thousands of years. Bread making is a thing that I think people find. I know I find it really comforting, but not in like a comfort food. I'm going to eat a bowl of pasta. I'm not necessarily going to eat the bread. I just like the process of growing it and being part of that. So I don't know.
It's so entrenched in our culture. I mean, even like breaking bread, and it's all about, and it was a staple for everyone for so long.
And the beauty, I think, of the automation of work will leave people free to, if you want to make sourdough bread from scratch. Like that's a privilege that I have because I'm a middle class woman who works in arts and doesn't have a 9-to-5 job. Right. If you've got kids and you have a 9-to-5 job and you've got to race around, and you're probably not making
different
sourdough.
Opportunities for
So, but if a lot of that stuff is automated and you want to do that, you can do that. This is very old school Marxist sort of.
Well, it sounds very
thinking.
utopian, and
it is
and
utopian.
I hope we find a way towards that.
It was the point of it.
That's right.
The automation was supposed to be a good thing. It wasn't supposed to be this evil thing that takes jobs away. It was supposed to, allow us to work less.
But what's happened is that, it's like we find a way to make something more efficiently, and rather than giving ourselves more time off, what we do is we just throw more projects at it and then fill up that capacity. It's like if we find a way to have increased capacity, we just fill it up rather than taking a break. And so my worry is, how do we get over that? Like, once we automate everything, are we just going to find other bullshit jobs to fill it with?
Well, I think this is where the stuff we're talking about, millennials, I have a lot of hope for, because like you were saying, they're interested in experiences, not having things. And I'm hoping they're going to be able to take, or if not that generation, the generation after can take all of this and change the culture, because it's a cultural thing, right? Work, especially in North America. It drives me nuts because I'm smart lazy. When I go out with people, I say, how are you? And they're like, oh, I'm so busy. I'm so busy. I'm so busy. And being busy is a value thing.
Yeah, they want to be lauded for it. It's
And we as a culture, I think, value it, and we see anything else as laziness. And even when you read early contact stuff between the Europeans and North America, they're constantly talking about the Aboriginal peoples being lazy, and they only work part of the day because they worked
smart.
They got stuff done. So they could survive, and then they had playtime. And the European ethos was like, there's something bad, and we have to beat this out of them. So it's not working this much is not a human nature thing.
But it's the remnants of those cultural practices that are going to be difficult for us to get over, in the sense that everyone's going to feel like they're lazy or slacking off, or they need to work on something. But there's been a lot of talk lately about guaranteed personal income, which I think is a great idea. I hope something like that would happen, but it's so counterintuitive to a lot of people. Yeah. But it seems like we've forgotten. Sounds like you're kind of in the Marx realm of ideas sometimes.
Probably.
But it seems like I've participated in the capitalist world, and I've done well in it, and I've figured out how to play the game. But it seems like a lot of people have forgotten why we play that game. The reason that capitalism, or the aspects of it that I like more is the open source way of thinking about the world, is efficient in getting us what we want, right? But we forget what we want. Yeah. It's not that we should want more accumulation. If the idea is that we want to make a good world for everyone, let's use this free market system to get what we want, but don't make that an idealism where everything becomes the game. Right. That's a little nuts. Yeah.
And it is a kind of utopianism, right? Like the idea that constantly it's kind of madness as well. It's like a hamster wheel where you're constantly, and where globalization is sort of, and neoliberalism is kind of coming back to bite us in the butt. And that's why we have Trump and Ford and weird stuff, because people don't understand this complex reason why some people have and others don't. And
well, that goes back to kind of a lack of context for everybody. They're not necessarily seeing a historical perspective, and that it sounds like an elitist bullshit here, but it's true. I mean, people don't know what happened. Even there's the Nixon era and how that relates to what's happening in Trump, and if they don't know that, all they see is this entertaining guy on TV, and hey, let's fuck shit up and see what happens if he wins, And there's that instinct going on as well. But you gotta know the context.
Well, and I'm back on the sort of looking for jobs, and I've been looking at sort of what's out there, and I saw a job. I saw a job advertised for a receptionist that paid like $12 an hour. And it was a Facebook ad on something, and I actually commented that I had that same job.
Right.
They wanted university and so many years. Yeah. I got that job as a high school dropout in 1990. Wow. For the same rate.
It hasn't changed. Yeah.
It hasn't changed in that many years. Mm-hmm. But my rent back there, shared with somebody else, was $600 a month. So my rent is astronomical.
Too damn high.
They're still paying the same amount. So I can see why people are feeling disenfranchised, because you're working just as hard, and you can't get ahead. So you're trying to figure out what, and I think the guaranteed minimum income is probably the best answer, but I can also see how a lot of people are going to find that problematic. Well,
problematic in many ways. I think the problematic side of things that are often parlayed as a criticism of it is that it's kind of this moral hazard that if you give people, they're just going to be, leeches on the system or whatever. And my answer to that is, maybe 10% of the people will be like that, but who cares? It'll all average out. Yeah. And if those people want to be unproductive and not take part, whatever, let them do that. Let them sit around and live off their minimum income. I'm not going to begrudge them for that. But it's like this, there's an ancient story where they say a guy was given a wish, and he said, I can give you any wish in the world, but whatever I give you, I'm going to give your neighbor twice as much. And the guy thinks about it, and he says, well, okay, take out one of my eyes. It's kind of like, if you got what you need, what do you care? If, the other people there got it easier or whatever, as long as you're getting by.
It's not that some of this, I guess, has to do with personality types and viewpoints. It doesn't make sense to me, but I wonder also, though, again, like it's getting older. Just spent some time with my mom, who this last summer, just because I was just working all summer. So she has this little trailer in my hometown on the lake.
Oh, yeah?
Which when she bought it, I was like, you became trailer trash? What? But I ended up going and spending the weekend there. And then the dog loved it. It's right on the lake. It's nice. A nice little trailer. It's just a summer place. Right? Yeah.
You just need a small place to sleep in and wash up.
It's got running water. It's got a hot shower. It's got everything. It's got the fire pit. I mean, I ended up staying 3 weeks because it was so nice. Yeah. And she said to me, because I grew up, we had money, and she traveled all over the world and did all sorts of things, and things happened, and she's probably really thrilled that I'm announcing her life on here. But she said that she's the happiest now she's ever been in her life, and she has the least she's ever had in her life.
Isn't that amazing? Yeah.
Because she's not working for the stuff.
She's just got angst.
She's just got she's got this little tiny little weird patch of paradise that.
That's great. I kind of have this fantasy about, been had it for years, of basically selling everything off and just like minimizing. But I kind of gave up that idea the last few, because I'm in this big space.
Yeah, you have a great space. Yeah,
too big for one person. But I'm gonna keep this as my guilty pleasure and like a big space. But there's something very appealing about that. Like, because the more stuff you have, the more you have to worry about things, you know? So we'd be doing people a favor if we simplified their lives, and you don't have to work. You don't have to accumulate shit. Have public transit and do what you like. If you like to make bread, make bread. Yeah. Wouldn't that be amazing?
Yeah.
Are we going to get there? I don't know.
Maybe not in our lifetime, maybe, but hopefully we'll move ourselves. Fortunately,
we're primates, and we throw a lot of shit around. So if it's not, literally, figuratively, we do that. So it's always like we find ways to fuck things up, But
it seems like.
But I'm optimistic. It sounds like you might be optimistic. Would you think?
I'm naturally an optimist, so I tend to see things on the bright side, no matter what. And like I said, I think we can actually, that millennial generation can actually make changes, especially if ownership becomes something that isn't important to them. I think that's going to make a huge fundamental cultural change and value change that might shift some of that.
But the problem is the olds are in charge, and they don't have the incentive.
But not forever.
Yeah.
And
so
some of this,
lag,
I have maybe even a fetishized idea about demographics. I think demographics are huge, and I think that one demographic that's been making all the rules is moving on to other things.
Or dying. But the thing is, they're not really dying. That's the thing. In the sense that we're getting extended lifespans as well. And there's also that technological thing that's on the horizon, which is life extension. It's quite feasible that you and I could live to 200. It's possible. You should be ready for this, maybe. Here's the thing. You only have to...
I thought I was halfway there.
I know, but we're not close now, maybe. All you have to do is basically stay ahead of the life expectancy. It's not like... So life expectancy now around here is like 84 or something like that. But by the time you reach 74, it's gone up to 94. By the time you reach 84. So you could keep catching up to it, like Zeno's paradox, and never get there and find yourself 200 years. Hey, I could be immortal. Are you ready for this?
I hope not.
You hope not. That's interesting. So if I said to you, you can pick how long you want to live, what do you think is kind of an ideal range?
I think 80s are...
Really? Okay. Yeah. You're not greedy.
No, it's just sort of, I think this is just sort of watching. I had younger grandparents and younger parents. So I sort of saw, my grandparents were 10 years younger than I am now when I was born. So
10 years? Wow.
Not quite.
Yeah.
9 years younger.
Right. That's true. There's a big shift there.
Yeah. So they were in their late 30s. That's, so I got to see, my grandparents. One of my grandmothers is still alive. They're the same age as most of my friends' parents. Right. So I've had an interesting kind of watch people. I've had a closer look at life stages. And when my grandmother, both of them, the one that just passed away, it was in her mid 80s. She was ready. She was like, I've done my life. I've had my kids.
Yeah,
and apparently that's a thing that happens. There's once you get into your 80s, you become very accepting of it, of your mortality. I think we're more worried about it, and I'm less worried about it than I was in my 20s. I would wake up in the middle of the night worrying about it.
Yeah, you're right. Even though I think I've clung to it a long time, but even now these days I'm thinking, I've almost lived 50 years, and I think. If something were to happen, I wouldn't be too upset about it. It's although there's a lot of shit I want to do. Yeah. And to me, that's the reason I want to extend my life, because, I want to learn those 30 languages. Yeah. I want to figure out shit. I want to talk to aliens and go on more psychedelic trips, which is also the other thing that has maybe gotten me to be a little bit more comfortable with this notion of passing as well. Is that you when you go into one of these realms, you start to realize that that your everyday reality is not necessarily the only reality, and it starts to make sense. You can say that it sounds hippy dippy, but when you're in there, it's like, oh yeah, it's kind of an arbitrary reality that we're in. Yeah. Did you ever try those kind of things? Or you?
No.
Yeah.
No.
Cool.
Interesting. Yeah. It's just sort of one of those things that I haven't decided.
I got into it very late in life, and I'm kind of glad that I did, because if in my youth, if I was doing that, I'd probably just get sucked into it. And you wouldn't get as much out of it. I think probably in your 40s, it's a better time to try something like that.
I'll have to think about that.
You're more...
Hasn't been... No? Interesting that it's just never been something that...
Yeah, no, and it's not... And well, obviously, there's good reasons for that. I mean, speaking of, propaganda and all that, there's a lot of cultural, information out there that is really just based on, falsehoods about it. And I don't like to call it drugs, for example. I call it psychedelics. But if it's like cocaine or heroin or something, those are drugs.
Yeah.
But to me, like psychedelic mushrooms or LSD is I don't know, it's not medicinal necessarily, but spiritual and being the rationalist atheist growing up. These are the moments in my experiences where I think, I think I might know what these religious people are talking about. Like for the first time, you kind of experience that, which makes it doubly strange that it's outlawed everywhere that's religious.
Well, okay, interesting, yeah.
Yeah. It's like they don't want the competition, maybe.
No.
Has religion ever played a part in your life?
Oh, yeah. A huge part of my life, yeah. Grew up in a small town and...
was it like Mennonite country or something?
There's not so much over there, but my dad's Baptist, and so I was involved in evangelical religion until I was about 20. It was really right-wing, too.
Oh, no kidding.
Mm-hmm.
So how has that impacted you? What's the lasting effects of that, do you think?
I think it probably makes me a little bit more open. I'm open-minded, more open to conservative ideas because I grew up with them.
Right.
It didn't take very long to shed them, but I get where they come from and why people think the way they do, and I definitely was able to, because I'm fairly intellectual and a logical person. I was able to come to some pretty right-wing conclusions, was completely okay with it. So that's why I was saying I like intellectual conservatives, because it's like you're actually not getting to that point emotionally. You've got this... I don't agree with it, but you're actually approaching it from an intellectual point of view.
You could maybe have an argument with their argument, but if it's not clouded by this irrationality, I guess that could lead them astray.
And both sides can be emotional, right? So it's sort of, and that's what dialectics is, right? The conversation, and sometimes you come out at the other end. Yeah. With something better than the one point of view. So I think I find myself being very impatient with dogmatic lefties. Sure. Because I'm like, don't shout down the other side. Don't, because those are my people. Those are the people I grew up with.
Right. So. Yeah. When I was younger, I was probably, probably more concerned. I mean, I was, I don't know. Like in my teens and early 20s, I'd be the guy that was seeing everything through the rubric of like strength and weakness, maybe, for example. And you think, if you're saying this, you're just being a pussy or something, that kind of an approach when you're young. But I guess maybe it's owing to a lack of empathy at that time. And especially this is susceptible to young men, I think. And in my particular case, I came to it late in life, to be honest. And part of that has to do with acknowledging and understanding my emotional side. So it's kind of, I'm at odds here because, in some sense we're complaining about this over emotionality and irrationality in politics and, and all that. But personally, I found and discovered this late in life to be a very valuable superpower, right? And you want to use it, but you don't want to go too far down that path.
Well, I think the thing, though, is there's a difference between being introspective and understanding how your emotions work and denying that they're playing a role. And that's where the problem is, I think, maybe where we get this idea that guys are more, or men, I'm doing it too.
I'm all good with it.
Are more susceptible to that, what you're describing, because there's a denial. It's not like you weren't having emotions. You were just telling yourself you weren't. And then they come out in excesses. Yeah.
But in my case, it wasn't even so much that I was denying it. I was aware of it, but dissing it in a sense. It's
you saw it as a weakness. Yeah.
It's a weakness. It's like, I just need to get over this, or I need not to pay attention to it, or I need to figure out a more intellectual
that was the message that you would have been given.
Yeah. And you're rewarded for that. And especially within our, Western capitalism capitalist culture, that's the sort of thing that gets you success in the world.
Yeah.
But it's coming back to bite me. You see, we're complaining about the political arena where people are reacting to this debate strictly on emotional grounds and seeing a completely different result for the debate than someone who's viewing it intellectually.
Well, I don't know how I'm viewing it.
Yeah, I don't know.
I mean, it seemed to me, watching that last night, it was like, well, one of them was making some points. He was acting a little bit goofy.
Yeah.
The performance was not as polished,
right.
But
I think that might have been owing to the fact that the format of that debate was such that they encouraged back and forth. And I think he bought into that immediately and said, oh, I can just jump in and interrupt. But then he looked like an asshole for doing that over and over again. But a little impatient. Yeah.
Yeah, I did that. I don't understand that debate style anyway. So it's a bit...
I don't think it went the way they intended anyway.
I have no idea.
Yeah.
I've never watched it. I have never watched. No, that's not true. I did watch Sarah Palin's. But I watched them for the entertainment value. Yeah.
Mm-hmm. What about Trudeau here in Canada? He's getting a lot of great press and PR around the world, and
he's an interesting
he's getting too
one
much
for me. He's an interesting one because I'm not liberal, and. Okay, no, that's not true. I have to face the fact that I'm a liberal. But
Canadian liberal, or in the Canadian sense?
Yeah. Maybe not liberal party.
They say a different thing.
Yeah. But I used to think of myself as a lefty, and as I've gotten older and owned property and exploited labor power and owned cars and done own things.
Oppressed people.
Yeah. You kind of find yourself. They say, when I was younger, everyone's like, "Oh yeah, you're lefty now. You'll grow out of it." And I found it really patronizing and irritating. And I was like, I am more liberal than lefty, I think. I was more idealistic when I was younger, and now I'm kind of like, well, this is the world we have, and let's just try to make it as nice as we possibly can given the situation. That makes me a little more liberal than revolutionary. That said, I was not a big fan of Justin being the leader of the party, and I thought he was just going on the name stuff. And Gerald Butts, I think, is the actual prime minister, and blah blah blah. But what I think Gerald Butts has done very well, and however that's working with Trudeau, they've done a great PR job.
Oh yeah.
Which I think is part of the job.
Unfortunately, that's the game. Yeah.
I don't think it's I think what's going to happen now, I'm really troubled by some of the stuff with China. I'm troubled by some of the promises that were made that aren't with Indigenous people that are now getting backtracked a little bit, although they're very good at the diplomacy and the protocol part and the cultural part, which is all important. Having a mixed cabinet with such a diverse cabinet, having quotas, like that's a great leadership. Like our government should be leading by example with saying we're going to put 50% women in cabinet. We're going to have quotas because that's the only way to fix this problem at the moment. Yeah, so that's a great. So all those things are great, but then when we start getting into policy things, then you start seeing the centrist.
There's not a lot of follow through and change. There's more talk about change than actual change.
Yeah. I don't know how much. Then we have a Liberal Party in Ontario that's done a whole lot of change really fast, and I think it's shocked our economy a little bit and has caused them a lot of problems. So.
Well, the only time I got involved in politics in an official sense was I joined the Green Party many years ago. And I actually even signed on to be a campaign manager for someone to run in a federal riding. That didn't end up working out. She ended up dropping out of the race before it happened. But it was always like I was just around a bunch of people that had great ideas, but the tragedy of it is that no one's going to take these up. And the best, even when I was involved with that, the best I could hope for in those days was, and what I was hoping for was that somehow the Green Party and the Liberal Party would merge or something, and it would be sucked in by the policies of the Green Party, and then that would be how it would get implemented. It's a shame that the great ideas don't make it out of the fringe most of the time.
Well, I think Elizabeth May is a fantastic voice, and that she's in Parliament. And I do think that our representative Parliament is functioning at that level because she does do a lot.
She punches above her weight. Yeah.
And I think, this would be a really long conversation. Proportional representation would be better. I think it might serve us better. I think we better tread lightly into that territory because our system isn't. The problem with it is this idea that you have a majority government and then all these policies are getting passed and then caucuses are being whipped and having to do vote against their conscience and stuff like that. But on the whole, I think we end up pretty representative. I get worried because I think you need to have a conservative voice. I think that you need that. You need that counterbalance. Yeah. So I think we should be seriously looking at proportional representation. We have a system that served a population and a geography that. You know what I like about the parliamentary system, if for nothing else, is that it's kind of inherent within the system. The idea is that you're not picking a leader. You're picking representatives who then pick a leader for parliament. I love that. That's a much better way to go than the presidential system, where you think you're embodying all your hopes and fears into this one person who's going to take charge. That seems very fascistic to me. To even have that kind of a role. Like, why do we think that one person could do that? Like, it's ridiculous when you think about it. Like, I'm going to throw all this expectation and power on one person. But they have they have limitations built in, and in some ways, a lot. The Constitution is more democratic. Their system's technically more democratic. It just doesn't. It doesn't seem like it plays out that way. But they've got the upper and lower houses to. The president can't really.
There's supposed to be checks and balances, for the most part they work. You're right, but
so we went through. I think we had more of an autocratic system under Harper, where
those years. It was like the Bush years, I guess, for America. That's what it felt like.
But I think part of what worked for him, and then what has left the sour taste in everyone's mouth, which is why people are loving Justin so much, was because he didn't let anybody speak. He clamped down on communications, and he was very controlling. And he's right that you can stop a lot of fires by not letting anybody say anything.
Right. And what do we use in the trade-off? But it
creates, and that's apparently Hillary's problem too. She's actually very much like that.
Really?
And that's the distrust part, because it's like, well, what are you hiding? It's not necessarily that he had, I never felt like he had an agenda. It was just like, he had an agenda. It wasn't a secret. It wasn't a secret agenda, but part of the way that he enacted his agenda was to not let anybody say anything. And we distrusted that because we wanted
antithetical to our
we wanted that
open ways.
So to me that felt less, and even now, if Justin yesterday announced that if there's not a cap and trade or carbon tax invoked by each of the provinces, then they're going to impose one on those provinces. That's a bit dictatorial.
It is.
It is how our system works, and sometimes, and it's how his dad worked, and it seems like...
Oh, did he ever? Yeah.
So it's an interesting... Sometimes I don't trust him. I'm kind of like, is he just trying to rerun the stuff his dad did? I don't know.
Yeah, I don't know what to think of that, but I guess it could be worse, is how I see it.
But he's well loved around the world, and that matters. It's important. So it raises our scope around the world and trade and all those things. So
they're kind of figureheads that are representative of our brand. Canada.
Canada, the brand. Yeah,
and he's kind of helping that brand, I guess, if you don't scratch too deep below the surface. Sounds good. How you feeling?
I'm feeling, I'm tired now.
Yeah.
How are you feeling?
We could wind down. Yeah, that's a great conversation.
Yeah, it was.
Thank you for coming in, and you're always welcome back.
Oh, thank you.
As a traditional high five.
Oh. Thanks so much. Bye-bye.
That was great. I enjoyed Nice variety of topics.
My God, we really covered them all.
Yeah, that was really good. I really enjoyed that.